Hi guys, welcome to Zoe's Fancy Cakes, and today I'm going to make a little miniature doll cake for you. Dolores, I really enjoyed making this one. Let's get started. So I'm going to start by piling up some small cakes, and I've got Victoria sponge and chocolate cake, and these are just 4 inches across, these ones, guys. So I'm keeping it really quite small. We're not going to get a huge amount of cake out of this one, but that's fine because we're going to pair it up with my doll mould, so my Gemma face and body mould, and it's only small, so it needs to go in a small cake. So I'm going to put a wooden skewer through the top in the middle to hold it together, and we're just going to cut a bit of a slope. So we're aiming for a bit of a cone-shaped dress or skirt. And it's just chocolate buttercream between the layers, guys. I've actually put this one on a gold plate. Usually I would put them on a cake drum, but I thought it looked quite nice on a gold plate that I had in the kitchen cupboard. Also, please excuse the mess in the background. There were workmen around at the time of me making this video, and they were sort of pulling bits apart in the kitchen. I was getting a new flooring put down, so it's a bit of a mess. But I'm going to cover the whole thing in chocolate buttercream, and we're just going to scrape that down to give it a nice smooth edge. That's going to go in the fridge, and while that's in the fridge, I'm going to work on the body and the head. Now, you can, of course, just freehand them. I know I've made other videos where I have made the torso and the head completely freehand, and you can see plenty of my other doll cake videos on my YouTube channel. But for this one, I'm going to use my mould. So this is the mould that I've designed and created myself, guys. And I'll put links to it below. I'm actually going to put a little polystyrene ball in the head in this one. So I've pushed my modelling paste in pretty firmly. Now, it's only got a small mouth and nose, so you have to press in really firmly. Otherwise, they don't show up very well. And I'm just using Serracino modelling paste for this one. Again, what I'll do is I'll put links below to the exact paste that I've used, but you can use whichever type you want. So I'm not going to have to do her any legs because she's already got a skirt. So we're just going to do the arms, head and body in these moulds. Give them a little bit of time to firm up. You can put them in the fridge or freezer for 10 minutes if it helps to firm them up. And then I'm just going to pull them out with the help of a little wooden skewer. And I'm just opening up the mouth a little bit with the craft knife because I want her to have her teeth on show. And I have just cut the lip a little bit on my right hand side. I don't know if it shows a lot or not, but I decided I was just going to ignore it and carry on going anyway. So I've put a small piece of white paste in for her teeth, and then I'm just going to gently nudge up the bottom lip so that it comes in contact with the teeth. Now the eyes on the mould are a slightly different shape to what Dolores has, so I'm just going to create new eye holes, just making some teardrop shapes in there. I'm going to fill them with white modelling paste. Just be careful to try and get a similar amount in each eye. I think, again, with mine, she's ended up with one eye a little bit bigger than the other. Sometimes you don't notice when you're making it. It's only when you see it finished at the end that you realise things work quite even. So I've got a ball of paste for the ear. I'm just pressing it down in the middle to give it a bit of a dip, and then we're going to cut it into 2 halves. These are going to go on for her ears. Just give them a firm press on in place. I'm just going to remove the body. Now, guys, I haven't shown you a lot of detail or given you too many hints and tips on using the mould in this particular video, but I do have other videos on using this mould. So if you do have the mould and you want to see other videos, click on the links in the corner of the videos now. So I'm going to slide her body onto that wooden kebab skewer that I put in there earlier. I'm just going to prop it up slightly from the skirt with a tiny bit of paste, just a little bit. Just because I've got a bit of a gap at either side where her hips are. I might even make one hip slightly bigger than the other so that she looks like she is sort of leaning a bit more to one side to listen to things. So one side's kind of up a little bit more, the other one's further down. So I'm going to put that body and the skirt to one side, and we're just going to put a bit of colour on the face. So we're going to add a bit of pink blush to the cheeks and the ears. And these are edible dusts that I'm using, guys. Please don't just use your makeup, although to be honest, we're not going to eat this head because remember I did put polystyrene ball in her head. And the whole idea of that polystyrene ball was just that it made it a little bit easier for me to remove it from the mould, and it stops the head sinking down on the kebab skewer. But you can do the head completely solid in paste. So I'm adding some brown just above each eye to give her eyelids a bit of shade. So I'm just going to add her some tiny little freckles using a brown edible pen. Don't press too hard. You want to keep the dots nice and small. You don't have to add the freckles if you don't want. I don't think they're too obvious on her. And then I'm also just going to draw sort of around the top section of each eye to create an eyelid. I'm using some edible red dust for the lips. Now this red dust I have mixed with clear alcohol, or you can use dip-in solution or rejuvenator spirit. It just helps create a nicer paint. If you use it with water, it sometimes goes a bit clumpy. So I've got some brown modelling paste and I've just rolled 2 little pieces, cut them short, and these are going to go on for the eyebrows. I feel like they're not quite dark enough, so I might go over them with a black pen. Just nudge them up a tiny bit in the centre. So I'm now going to take a little bit of black modelling paste and I'm going to try and roll it really thin. I'm adding a small amount of water just around the edge of the eye, almost where I drew that brown line earlier. And we're just going to stick a tiny piece of black on there. So this is going to create like her eyelash line. So just curve it around the outer edge and just repeat the same on the other eye. So if you don't want to use the face mold, guys, you don't have to. You could make this freehand. I do have other videos where I do the faces freehand on here as well. So I'm going to use a brown edible pen for just drawing in the eyes. I think I've made her a little bit cross-eyed, a little bit bug-eyed looking. So I maybe should have worked a little bit more on where I positioned the iris. I'm just using a slightly damp brush to sort of blend the edge of the pen in as well. And then I'm going to take a black pen and just draw a small dot in the middle of each eye for the pupil. Again, it is an edible pen, guys. Now, I want to add a highlight of white in each eye. You can use a white pen, you can use white dust, but for this one, I think it's going to be easier for me to cut a tiny, tiny bit of white paste and stick that in instead. Then I'm just going to use some yellow for her earrings. I'm going to keep them pretty simple. Let's just stick a little ball of yellow on the bottom of each ear. Just make sure the head is firmed up a little bit and then you can add the hair. So I'm going to add a little strip of brown. This is actually the brown Saraceno mixed with the black Saraceno, so because I wanted it a little bit darker than the brown it comes in. And we're just going to put it over sort of the top part of her forehead, down towards the ears. And then we're just going to trim that so it fits. So you just want it to come slightly in front of the ear on each side. And then I'm just going to trim it down at the back. So she wears like a headband that covers part of this up. So if you don't get a really neat seam, don't worry too much. Let's add some lines in so she's got a bit more texture in her hair. Just do it sort of from the forehead backwards. I've just rolled some really tiny pieces into some little curls and I'll just stick those just in front of her ears. And then I've just got a little piece that I've squashed and I'm just placing that on the back of the head. I didn't get it very in shot when I did this, guys, so apologies. It just wants to meet with the front piece. And then you can put some hairlines in, but put the hairlines so they go towards the top back of her head. And I'm just resting the head in the head mold each time just because it's handy for me to rest it in there. So we've got a strip of red modelling paste now and we're going to put this around that seam. So around the join between the 2 pieces of brown hair. And then let's just cut it where it meets in the middle. And then I'm just going to put a ball of brown paste on the top of her head here. Just make sure it's securely attached. And then we're going to make lots of tiny curls and we're going to cover the ball on the top of her head with these tiny curls. So don't roll them too thick. If it's easier, wrap them around a cocktail stick. And then I've just covered the ball on the top of her head in water, but you can use edible glue. And let's just press those firmly onto there, fully covering that little piece on top of her head. Once the hair's on, we can add the bow. So I'm just going to create kind of 2 triangles of paste, but don't press them too thin. And then we're going to press in at the middle so it looks like it's got a bit of a dip. I'm going to make 2 of these and we're going to stick them on at the top of the headband. And then we want a little oval in the centre. Let's put some little lines in that. So it looks like folds and creases. So I still need to do the back just there. I'm fairly pleased with her. I could have spent a bit more time on getting her eyes a bit neater, but I think she'll do the job. So I'm just looking at how she leans and I'm just going to take out that skewer and re-put it in at a bit more of an angle because I want her to really look like she's leaning. Don't do it at such an angle though that, you know, she's going to fall out of the cake. And I'm cutting a bit of that wooden skewer off the top and then I'm going to insert this onto here. Now remember she was on a wooden skewer earlier where I took her out the mould, so she's already got a hole in the head, and you might find you have to cut a little bit off the top of the neck to get the head to sit nicely on that neck. And I'm going to take a strip of red. Now I've actually added a tiny bit of brown to the red paste that I have just to make it a little bit darker in colour. And we're just going to pop this around her neck for her little necklace. We want a tiny piece of yellow, and this is going to go on the front of it. Just there, like so. Going to use a red pen, just put a dot in the middle. For the skirt, I'm using some red fondant, and we're just going to roll it out. Just make sure big enough that it's going to cover the dress part or the skirt part of your doll. Now, I had a cake drum in my cupboard that was left over that was 10-inch round, so I used that as a rough guideline. I thought it might need to be a little bit bigger, so I slightly bigger than that 10-inch round drum that I used to try and create a circle. I'm going to cut a small circle from the middle that her waist is going to go into, and it won't fit over her head, so let's put a slit down like so. You can put water or piping gel on the cake itself, and then we're going to press this on. Now you want to, rather than pushing it flat against the cake everywhere, you want it to kind of pleat. So you might have to pick it up and try and fold it, play around with it a little bit to pleat it. I found it pleated quite nicely in some areas and not so well in others. I think it would have fallen nicer if I'd have just dropped it over the head. So if you want to add the body after rather than before, like what I did, then you might find you get nicer drapes. So it's just up to her waist. I'm going to remove the arms. Now, you could remove these earlier on, but by leaving it in the mold, it stopped my paste drying out too much. Like, they firmed up a little bit, but not too much. I'm just going to reheat the elbow joint so that I can bend that a little bit. I want a little point on her elbow. I'm just cutting through the fingers just to separate them as they come together in the mold. Just bend her fingers over slightly. And I think I'm going to have to add a little bit of a skewer just to make sure that this arm doesn't fall off. So join it up to the top of her body and bend that hand up towards her ear. Now the arms are pretty lightweight, so they should stay up fairly well. We might have to put a bit of edible glue on her hand to stick it to her ear. We're doing the same with the other one, but the hand's going to touch the hip instead. Then we're going to roll out some white fondant, or you can use modelling paste. Now, modelling paste is going to be a little bit easier to work with because you'll be able to get it thinner. And we're going to wrap this around her body. Don't worry too much about being really neat at this point because she's got lots of other parts to her top that will cover up all these seams. But I will need to cut a little bit off the length. So I just want it to meet with where the red skirt ends. I'm just adding a tiny piece in the gap between her arm and her shoulder, but it's not going to be seen. And then a little strip just around the top section of her arm. Push her hand back in place. Do the same on the other arm. Yeah, sorry guys, I don't know why I work with it at one side of the camera rather than in the middle. So I've got these fluted edged round cutters, and I'm going to use this for the frill for the top section of her top. And I'm just going to frill it with a cocktail stick. So you're just going to roll the cocktail stick backwards and forwards over the edge. If your paste is too thick, it will not work. If your paste is a bit tacky, it won't work. Just cut out a little circle in the middle. Now, it would have been easier had I used a circle cutter, but I decided I was going to freehand it. And this is just going to stick across that top edge. And I'll try and put the join at the back. So you can see it covers her shoulders and all the joins between her arms and body. Then we want two smaller pieces for the edge of her sleeves. We're going to try and frill it again. And let's just place it around the edge of her arm. Just be careful that you don't knock her arm off. They are quite thin and fragile. And this time I'm going to cut a thin strip of red that's going to go around her middle. So this is the very top of the skirt, the hem of the skirt. Is it the hem of the skirt at the top, or is the hem the bottom? Then let's cut some strips of yellow. Now I mixed a tiny bit of brown into some yellow fondant that I had. The brown had started to dry a tiny bit, so you will notice little specks of brown. These aren't intentional, guys. It's nicer if you don't have the brown speckles in. So you're going to stick this around the skirt, and you're going to do this twice. Once fairly near the top and another one fairly near the bottom. If it doesn't go on in one piece, don't worry, you can join it up. And actually, guys, I've just seen she's got another one on, so there's 3 stripes, not 2. We need more thin yellow stripes, or strips. One's going to go around the top of her outfit, the top of her top, and then a little bit around the arms as well, so just around the sleeve. She has some red detailing on that, so almost like red stitching detail, so I'm going to really carefully put some little lines on with a red pen. Now, I struggled to get this on camera, so I apologise that you can't really see it very well. If you want to darken or shade the skirt at all, you can use a deeper red powder, edible powder, or even black if you want to add more shading, but you know, it looks fine without as well. Then for the other kind of patterning, I want almost a partially transparent colour. So I'm using a bit of white, but it's diluted down a lot with my Rejuvenator Spirit. And then I'm just going to paint it on. You can see it, but it's not too heavy colour-wise. It's fairly transparent. We're going to use a bit of yellow now to just paint the edges on her outfit. So the edge of the sleeves and the top edge of sort of the ruffle on her top. Going to swap to a thinner paintbrush and let's paint a bit of patterning on. Now I tried to go for what her patterning looks like in the film, but mine's not quite the same. And we're going to do the same on those stripes that we painted on earlier, those transparent stripes. We're just going to paint some patterning on. Again, my patterning isn't the same as what she actually has. I tried to just go a bit easier because I'm not very good at painting on little patterns. And you're going to try and do this all the way around both stripes. So once you've painted the patterns on, she is all finished. Let's cut her and see what she's like inside. I like this one. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. I really enjoyed making her. She's only a small cake, but that's fine because it's just giving me eating her. Don't forget to click and subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you next week for my next tutorial. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below. You can see more of my tutorials by clicking on the images on screen now. If you haven't already, make sure you click the subscribe button to stay up to date with my future tutorials. There are also links in the description box below where you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and more.